Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. And today, as my guest, I have John Loftus. Welcome, John.
Well, thanks for having me on your program. I appreciate any exposure I can have so that I can promote the things that I'm interested in. And I hope that they have something to say that people need to hear. So thanks.
I hope that our audience will come up with some good questions for us. But I want to start out by saying that John has written a number of books, and there is a link in the description to an Amazon page that will give you a whole list of John Loftus's books. John, you've been writing about being an atheist for how long now?
I think my first book came out in 2008. I think I've about done my penance by now for all the time I spent studying what I did. So I'm about ready to give it up. We'll see. I'm done. I've covered about every topic that's important within a certain realm, and I'm happy about that.
I said something similar myself to someone. They asked me why I do what I do, and I said, hey, I spent 42 years telling people about why God is real. Now I got to spend the rest of my life telling people why he isn't.
I know, it's crazy. It's crazy. And then they say, well, wait a minute, you're just too passionate. That you flip, from one side to the other. You're too unreliable because you're too passionate. Well, it is true that I'm passionate. That's just a matter of fact. I was swayed by the evidence, and that makes all the difference in the world. Reason and evidence.
Now, you originally started seeing some cracks in your faith even back when you were still a seminarian, correct?
Well, I studied at evangelical institutions, and then I went to a liberal college, Marquette University, in a program on theology. And I kept thinking as I went from Great Lakes Bible College to Lincoln Christian Seminary to Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, every time I moved from one college to the next, they say the liberals are there. Don't go to that institution. The liberals are there. Well, I found the liberals finally at Marquette University, and I was quite shocked at things because I was, evangelical. I mean, we were the ones who hold our heads in the sand. I think they're just oblivious to what's out there. I mean, the liberals I found were correct, and the Bible is exactly. They share with atheists a lot of what we think about the Bible, and they have good reasons for it. So, and then I was adrift for a while about, well, what am I going to believe now? And it wasn't too long, maybe about 10 years after I finally gave it all up. Yeah.
Now we talked about this a little bit before the show, but where are you? You don't have to give your exact. Okay.
I thought I would do something a little different. I'm at a park. It's called Schoaf Park in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I love Fort Wayne. It's where I was born and raised. And you did a stint here yourself. We were talking about that.
Yep.
And come to Fort Wayne. That's a good place. So anyway, it's a nice day, and I thought I would just do that. Be outside rather than do something inside.
Mm-hmm. Now you actually did finish seminary and did pastor for a while, correct?
Yes, I was a youth minister at a church, and I was a senior minister, and I was I just went around and I preached. They say, "Well, come to preach with us. Come to preach with us." And so yeah, I did a lot of that. Yeah.
You were kind of an itinerant pastor?
For a while there, while I was in seminary. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
And did you ever pastor while you were an atheist?
Well, now that's a tricky question. You didn't put that down on your list, I didn't
Yes,
do that
I know.
well. Well, I did actually preach two of my last sermons. One was at a Baptist church that it was conservative, but then I knew the preacher. He was my cousin, and I didn't say anything that he would object to. but I was in the throes of doubt. I just used the Bible as a touching point to make psychological points about behavior and being good to one another, and your spouse and your kids, and your stuff like that, and that everybody should agree to. And then the last sermon I preached for a Unitarian church, and that I was talking about faith and my being an atheist. So, but that, I guess that doesn't count for you. But those are actual sermons. And one guy at the Unitarian church was kind of upset because I talked about atheism. But they said say whatever you want. But I guess they didn't really mean to say whatever you want.
Yeah, that's for sure. What you relate there is very similar to what another former pastor said on the show, was that, he was in this and he started trying to preach whatever he could in good conscience say, and eventually it just got too difficult and he realized he had to leave. Yep.
That's what the Clergy Project is all about, helping these ministers find their way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I didn't have the Clergy Project to help me because my doubt came in the 1990s, and by 2005 I was already out the door.
So what did you do at that point? Were you old enough to retire, or is that when you started writing?
No, I had to find other income, and I did it, and I started blogging in 2008. 3 years later,
Mm-hmm.
I got a little money, but that I have to be honest, my ex-wife, she we both, she contributed more to the household income. We had a couple kids, and it was all that. But I did different odd jobs. Nothing embarrassing, but a lot of different odd jobs.
Fred Harvey says parts of the Bible are really nice, very small cherry-picked parts. Now, you mentioned in one of your books that you studied under William Lane Craig, and recently the atheist community has given him the moniker Low Bar Bill. I think you heard about that and why he's been given that moniker?
I don't know how to react to that because he doesn't. One question he doesn't answer, and that is, where's the objective evidence for any statement in the Bible or any miracle? I mean, he won't tackle that one. So yes, in that sense, I mean, Frank Turek is another one. He wrote a book with Norman Geisler, and they won't answer the tough questions, but they won't, even if they address the tough questions, they don't answer them correctly.
I've noticed that too.
So Frank Turek, he asked, well, who should I debate? I said something to the effect on Twitter. I said, not low hanging fruit, but a formidable opponent. Mm-hmm. I didn't mention myself in it. I just said, stop treating low hanging fruit. So he's in the same boat. I think any well-respected apologist on their side, well-respected from their side, is someone who only takes on low-hanging fruit because that's just the nature of the beast. They don't take on the tough question. William Lane Craig won't debate me, and I've submitted some questions to him. He won't answer. He says it's not appropriate because, why is it not appropriate, Bill? Hey, Bill, you listening? And I like him. He looks like a used car salesman when I see all these videos he puts up on Facebook every day or so. But he just won't answer me. He doesn't want to deal with me. It's not appropriate to deal with a former student who rejected everything he teaches. Well, I guess I know why. Sorry about your luck.
Tell that to Stephen Hawking. I found it absolutely fascinating listening to his biography and saying that, he when he did his PhD dissertation, as soon as he was granted his PhD, he then turned around and wrote a book about how he was completely wrong and all the parts that he got wrong, and what he should have said. Yeah, he debunked himself.
Well, every day I debunk myself.
Yeah, yeah.
When I was, but again, the key is the lack of objective evidence. The lack of evidence in some cases, any kind of evidence, but corroborated evidence. And we have to cross-examine Mary and Joseph for consistency and truth. We don't know. We don't have any evidence she was ever pregnant. Maury Povich wasn't there to test the baby and find out that no, Joseph is not the baby daddy after all, because we didn't cut off the foreskin and have it tested with the baby Jesus and to find out whether or not, or with Jesus and find out whether or not that actually happened. No, we didn't do any of that because it didn't exist. And then you say, well, what do you expect? It didn't exist. I don't think God should have sent Jesus prior to today's world where we can do the testing then. And why didn't he? Do you have some foresight in that or not? So he should have, but he didn't, because he's not God.
He'd also have a big problem because, now that we know about DNA, if we, if someone is claimed to have come from a virgin birth and we test his DNA, half of his DNA should be inhuman.
Half of his DNA should be
inhuman, because it's supposed to, half of his DNA would come from his mother and the other half of his DNA would come from nowhere.
A true alien, if you've ever heard of one.
Exactly.
And if Jesus was cloned from Mary's DNA, then correct me if I'm wrong here, but wouldn't Jesus be a female? I mean, isn't that? Yeah. I mean, so it's like, what the hell? I mean, Jesus was a baby, a female baby. You can't get around it.
Well, you have the same problem with Adam and Eve. If Eve was made as a clone of Adam's rib, then Eve should have been a man.
Stop asking factual questions, Franny.
A. Chapman says, what evidence? Good evidence is objective, independently verified, relevant, and supports the claim being made.
Wow. That's a lawyer speaking right there. It doesn't have to be. That's excellent.
Yep. Dr. Osiris says that Jesus and Eve could have been hermaphrodites.
We have trouble when it comes to intersex babies, that's for sure. Well, what do we do with that?
Mm-hmm. Or Jesus was a trans man.
Yeah, I mean, the options are many, and yet they still believe that Mary gave birth to an incarnate Son of God.
Mm-hmm.
Because it says so somewhere.
Yep. Now, your latest book is not one that you've written, but one that you edited. And you gathered a number of articles on mythicism together, and you wrote the foreword for the book. And so I've been reading particularly a lot of books by David Fitzgerald, a few of which
he's great.
Yeah, a couple of those are in your book. Now, mythicism right now is still a rather unpopular view, even in the atheist community. But I personally see it as something that's on the rise. Do you agree, or am I just finding it?
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. There was this DVD that came out somewhere in 2006, 7, or 8. I forget when that was. And I don't remember the name of it, but it was a video where they interviewed Robert Price, Richard Carrier, and a couple of other mythicists, and that took everybody by storm, because here were some PhDs and some credible people saying that Jesus didn't even exist as a human being. So I think. But then, if you ask me for anecdotal evidence, I would agree with you. I mean, I don't know if you have a poll that would say, yes, it is increasing, then that would be more, factually based. But what I do in the preface to that book is I say something that's quite obvious. Nobody should dispute it, except the idiots. I'm sorry, I shouldn't talk that way. is that in the four Gospels you have four different portraits of Jesus, and you can't really recognize them or harmonize them. And so what we can agree then is that the Jesus in any given gospel is not the real Jesus. It's a composite of everything. I mean, at the best case, it's a composite of all four gospels, and none of them can be reconciled. Luke talks about Jesus the man. John, Jesus is Son of God. Mark is a servant. Luke is friends of the outcast. So you can't really harmonize everything that's supposed to be harmonized with that. So what we know is that from the get-go, the Jesus in the Gospels didn't exist. And of course, now when we add into the fact that we know that the miracles attested or supposedly claimed in the four Gospels did not happen because of other considerations, then the Jesus in the Gospels never existed. That point is sure. So however else we want to deal with Jesus in the Gospels, and what other conclusions we might make, there's several different theories, and they're in that book that you just mentioned of mine, that whatever else you do with it, he's not, Jesus in the Gospels is not the Son of God, not as not a composite, and not with any miracles. So that was my point, and then I just let the rest of them just argue their cases, and they can do that on their own.
Zheng Fukushang Religion Destroyer says, if it can be shown the Bible was written for an agenda, that would support the mythicist position. Sorry, I took that off too soon for you. There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know this person. I'm sure he's probably pretty smart. But we didn't have agendas, I mean, I don't know what kind of. I mean, like a nefarious agenda, no. But
no, he's talking about the agenda of the gospel writers.
Well, I mean, this is not the case, but I'm going to suggest one agenda. This is not the case. If they intended to write the truth, nothing else but the truth, then that's an agenda, right? Am I wrong?
Okay.
They didn't do that. So I think I'm stuck on the word agenda. I mean, they did not do that. We can show that they did not do that. So I guess he's saying that they wrote them to convince people that Jesus is the Son of God. They wrote them to convince people that Jesus should be believed on for salvation. Oh yeah, at that point is solid of his, and so it's nothing but William St. Gregg's used car salesman approach. Have you ever watched one of his videos? He gets on there and smiles. I can't do that. He'll smile. He'll get real close to the camera and say, it's just not true. I can't even do what he does. But that kind of an agenda, which he has, is like a used car salesman, and what the gospel writers did, in fact, probably do.
I actually do a little bit of that myself, not a lot.
Good for you.
Well, what I mean is when I make a video, if I'm making a point that I really want to stress, I'll zoom in and have the picture a little bit closer when I'm making something I really want to stress.
Yeah, but you're the only one that does it good.
The detraction for that is sometimes I forget to zoom back out, and then I just leave it zoomed in for the rest of the video.
Well, I'm going to be a little silly here, but I can be like an accordion.
Yeah. Now, Bart Ehrman is probably one of the most respected scholars in New Testament today, and he recently put out a video that made me think he's beginning to soften on the idea of mythicism, but not exactly. And here's what I mean. The title of the video was "Were There Two Jesuses?" And I think and I didn't watch the video, so I don't know for sure. I can't say for sure, but I think what he was getting at is that there are different views of Jesus in different portions of the gospel, and even different views of Jesus in Paul, which he's discussed at length, which to me is one step away from mythicism.
It is. It is. It's if you can't nail down one Jesus from the evidence, from the text, then you're at least one step away from there being one Jesus, right? And you need that if you want to say that he existed. So yeah, sure, I don't doubt that a bit. Um, um, it would be kind of hard. I mean, the only way you'd reconcile that is to say that Paul thought Jesus was this at one time, and Paul thinks Jesus was something different, because that would like leave Paul's mind with some integrity. He's not talking out of both sides of his mouth. Jesus is this, but no, Jesus is that. So if we can avoid that kind of error, then I can't see any fault with that. What Berman's doing.
Thank you for the super chat, Late Night Keiju. Mythicism seems to be a spectrum, not just did Jesus exist. A man or men may have been named Jesus and led a life more or less like the biblical Jesus. Yeah, I absolutely agree.
Boom.
Yep.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, we're trying to nail that down, and what sources provided inspiration for the Jesus that eventually became part of the creeds, Nicene creeds, and others. That's the task of historians, and Mark Ehrman, Richard Carrier, Robert Price, and Maurice Casey. I guess they're all trying to work with what scant evidence that we have about that, and it's really tough to know. Okay, so there's some guy who wrote in like 2010, and then some other guy who wrote in, let's say, about 180, and some other guy wrote in 80, and you try to piece them all together. Did all their ideas mesh? It's not like the internet. We all of a sudden something happens in the internet, and boom, we all know about it. But back in then, how long did those ideas take to be heard by someone living, say, thousands of miles away? It takes a while, especially if it's in a different, language. So it's really tough to get to those things, but I suspect that if anybody's going to do it, the historian is going to do it. Bart's a historian, as is others I mentioned. And so we have to watch that all pan out, because the evidence is scant. That's all I'm just going to say.
We have a comment from Calming Waves Julian, which leads us into another question that I had for you. Calming Waves says, Loftus's outsider test for faith concept was very helpful for me. Even after not believing religion, I can apply it anytime I go easier on my in-group and harder on my out-groups. Tell us a little bit about your outsider test for faith.
Well, thank you, by the way. Thank you so much for saying so. I got a fan. I got one. I was arguing online where I get a lot of my ideas. I get a lot of my ideas from debating, believers, because they throw something at me, and I try to respond as best as I can. Well, sometime in 2006, I was having a back and forth exchange, and I just said, I thought to myself, well, what have I experienced? I mean, they're trying to explain how I left my faith, and I said, because now I treat it as if I'm an outsider. I'm a non-believer in it. I don't accept it anymore. So I threw that out there that you need to do the same thing if you want to know the truth. And I wrote a blog post about it. And so then I got attacked by, attacked literally, and not literally, but intellectually, about the idea, and all kinds of things were thrown at me, left and the right, because apparently I hit pay dirt. I must have spent a year or two just back and forth on that to clarify and to answer critics, and I guess it's a good thing, because they came at me. I mean, a lot of them came at me. The intellectuals, not William Lane Craig, by the way, because he won't acknowledge I exist. But others did. They saw I came up with something pretty cool, and that is treat your own inherited faith, your indoctrinated faith, as if you were an outsider, because that's how you treat the other faiths that you reject. And if you can approach it as an outsider and still come away as a believer, then why wouldn't you want to do that? I mean, you would want to know the truth, don't you? Huh? Don't you? So then you should probably look at that, and you treat the other doctrines with skepticism, and you try to make them mesh and try to harmonize those doctrines. And you also look for evidence. And so why don't you do that with your own faith? But it seems eminently useful and eminently important and eminently the only way. When I say only, I guess it's not the only way, but I like to use rhetoric for effect, just like they do. It's the only way to know the truth, if you really want to know it, and that is if you're going to look for evidence, you're going to do it as an outsider. Well, then look for evidence, because maybe it's there, maybe it's not. But don't you know? Don't you want to know? So I wrote a book about it, and it's got more in the book than merely what I just now said. It goes through the various counter arguments and alternatives, and they threw everything at me, and it's really I think my best book. I mean, it's because it gives it outlines the best way to treat religion, and I leave open the opportunity for saying, well, my religion is true. I if you can, but I haven't found that to be the case, though.
Now, in your book, where you talk about why you became an atheist, one of the things you mentioned in that book is that you wrote that book as much for believers as you did for unbelievers, if not more so. And I'm curious, what kind of reaction did you get to that book from believers?
Well, first off, it was a self-published book. I used to be the president of the Ministerial Association in the town I lived in, Engle, since you're Fort Wayne, probably know where Engle is. And as a president of the Ministerial Association, I had some kind of respect and stuff. And when I walked away from the faith, someone had, I was trying to be quiet about it, and someone said, well, Loftus, he doesn't believe anymore. And so somebody questioned me. And then this Jesus of Nazareth movie came out, where Mel Gibson's movie that Jesus got tortured for our sins. And I was asked about that, so I wrote a little editorial in a newspaper. I was quite surprised that they allowed that, and I said I have questions about that. I don't understand how this makes sense. Why is it you need to be punished before you can be forgiven? And if you can be a surrogate, someone else can take your place. Well, that makes no sense. So it got a lot of debate going in our county, and so it took off from there. I don't like being disagreed with, No, I mean, not. I don't mean that. Yes, in a polite, courteous way, but there's no really good way to end a discussion when the discussion is always. I got and one more thing. When I've already destroyed the major thing, so whatever.
Yeah. My personal journey is somewhat like what you discuss, although I actually went there on my own, because the first major crack in my faith came when I was I was reflecting on the life of the Apostle Paul, and I started thinking about what that meant from an unbeliever's perspective, and I had never thought about that before. And that was the beginning of the end of faith for me.
Shame on you. You decided to give in to reason. Oh, come back. Well, come back to faith. Come back to irrationality. Come on, we miss you. Oh, of course you did. I mean, that's what they say to us.
Right.
In reverse.
Right. Here's an idea that I have just stumbled on fairly recently is, believers are constantly telling us, well, you were never a real believer. And at first I would push back on that and say, obviously I was a real believer. I mean, I studied it. I went on the mission trips. I sang in the choir. I started a church library. I taught VBS. I did all the things that a Christian is supposed to do. I read my Bible. I prayed. I went to church. If I didn't do it right, what did I do wrong? But I've also kind of recently flipped that over and started thinking, well, because God was never real, I never had a real personal experience with God, even though I thought I did. And even though I thought I was a believer and I was doing in one respect, they're right, because God isn't real. None of it ever was real, so I never really was a believer.
I love that response. I mean, I really do. No, I never was a Christian because there's no truth to Christianity. There's no Christ who came to die on our sins. There's none of that crap. It's yeah, I never was a believer. So what are you gonna do with it?
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
and then I go on and I say, well, um, okay, now here's because I'm online. I've written books and things. I'll just simply if I could just like come in closer and talk quieter. It doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter if I never believed in Jesus. It doesn't matter if I'm lying through my teeth. I mean, it can lie if you when it comes to honesty. I get that, but it doesn't matter because you still have to deal with my arguments. Now, let's turn to page 1, or let's turn to page 20, or let's see this blog post here. How do you answer my arguments? I mean, what difference does it make if I was a Christian? Maybe I never was a Christian in the first place, ever. I don't even claim to be a Christian. It doesn't matter. I have presented some arguments, and you need to deal with them if you want to have a rational faith. So, but anyway, I have something on my blog, Debunking Christianity, called 5 Definitive Answers when saying to answer you never were a Christian. And it's not just me, but I've gathered together some links of others that would address that as well. 5 definitive answers for why I was well, guess I was never a Christian.
Okay. Okay. We'll have to go to the blog post and take a look at that sometime then.
I can do a plug if I want to. Well, I can't remember all 5 of them. I know that I agree with what you said.
Okay. Okay. One question I have for you with regards to our current situation, and that is, I have felt, and I know I'm not alone, a lot of people have felt far more threatened than I have by the current administration because of the election of the orange guy and Project 2025. Although I will admit, I've been shocked at how quickly they are dismantling some of our freedoms, like the freedom not to be a believer, the freedom to, uh, you know, um, the freedom to identify as whatever gender one wishes to identify as. Yeah, I've been shocked at how quickly they're taking some of this apart. I'm wondering what do you think about all of this and what faith has to do with it?
Well, it's alarming. Definitely, it's a scary time. I mean, if you're a marginalized person in the first place, how much more so do you feel threatened? I mean, just when you think about um, just being a Mexican, just working in around America, you don't know whether someone could just come up and whisk you away for no habeas corpus and just take you away. So you always have to carry your birth certificate or whatever else you had, and so it's an alarming time. And we have some cases like that. Um, I can only just hope that the courts will hold, and that's
Right.
Jamie Raskin was asked about that, and others, and he says the courts will hold, just like they did when
Good.
it came to whether or not Trump legitimately won the 2020 election. They held that there was not a faked election. So he says the courts will hold, and they already have proven themselves. Even the
Mhm.
Supreme Court on a couple of issues. So um, we just have to hope for that because the only other alternative is to do what what's his name? The guy who died, Joe Lewis. Joe Lewis. He says we have to cause good trouble.
Oh, uh-huh.
Good
Uh-huh.
trouble.
John Lewis. John
Good
Lewis.
trouble. John Lewis.
Yeah.
And he went against the police and they beat the shit out of him. And he still did that. So I just protest. I don't know, letter writings, whatever you can. I love what's happening in the the meetings when the congressmen come back to home and they have a meeting and all the people show up, the ones who didn't vote for him. And they got videos of that. Yeah, that's good trouble. Bring some good trouble their way, And I mean, all I can say is that I hope the courts will hold. They're our last hope, I guess, in America. And then we'll see. Here's what happens on the second year after the presidential election. Usually, the opposite party wins big.
Yes.
So let's hope it's an unusually high margin that gives us a couple of seats extra, to scale back what Trump's doing. I mean, I don't know. I mean, yeah, that's all I got. That's all I know about that. I hate him. I hate him.
Yeah. I'm hoping that a lot of people who voted for him will realize that that the reasons that they voted for him did not come to fruition.
I think that's happening.
Yeah.
I think that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
There's evidence that what he's doing that. He said that. What? Moments.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I know a lot of I live in Alabama. I live in the heart of the Bible Belt. And a lot of people here voted for the orange guy because they thought he was going to bring prices down. And he's doing exactly the opposite. And they're becoming disillusioned. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Maybe a momentary pain is going to help us get rid of him. I'm sorry. I don't wish him any success at all. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, except for when I say it all, I mean, there's always certain things I want to happen in midterm. I mean, that I wish, happen, but I can't name any of them right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. A. Chapman says, here in Australia, we thank Trump for the right wing losing big in our election. Yeah, Canada can say the same thing.
I hope that America, does the same here in a couple of years or a year now. Yeah, it's not too far.
Okay, there's a couple comments that I've been holding for a bit from Calming Waves Julian, who says, no matter what an unbeliever would lose, become Christian would give them, become Christian would give them eternal life. A Christian teacher or apologist actually faces losing in income and family troubles just for truth. There's real asymmetry, which keeps professional Christians in the faith. It's tough for them. Yeah. And Calming Waves Julian is exactly correct. We saw that with his name starts with an L. Mike Licona. He came out and said that some of the things in Matthew, particularly the hundreds of dead people getting up and walking during Jesus's resurrection and the temple veil tearing in two, that those are portents. They didn't really happen. And he got fired for saying that.
It happens. Conservatives are under the gun in conservative seminaries, but he's teaching for Houston Baptist College, I think is what now. And it's last I heard anyway. But so it's they're marginal liberals, but that issue right there is he's solidly correct about. I mean, like, okay, so you have all these Old Testament saints, supposedly they resurrected with Jesus, and then they walked around town, but nobody could remember when the funerals that they must have had all over again. Like, well, nobody had decided to write down any of their comments from like being on the other side. Well, tell me something more. They might have been more interesting to hear than anything else. But it's just nothing but apocalyptic literature, I think. It's I don't know how many people actually took it seriously even back then. So he's not. Look, he still hangs out with his big pal Bill Craig. So and Gary Habermas. So it's just only the Lydia McGrew who decides like she's going to be the whole monitor here for this dispute, and Tim, her husband. So how that works out, they're probably still friends. I mean, that internet can make enemies of us, as if unless they call for unless they call for one another to be fired, then they can't be too much friends after that. But it's just that's what scholars do. They debate things, and sometimes one scholar can get um, booted out of one seminar. He just find another one.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Scholars do that all the time, and yeah, and that's how we refine truth. You come up with an idea, and it's not quite right, but it's on the right track, and you get another scholar that kind of hammers away at the parts that aren't quite right, and eventually you get closer to the truth.
Yeah, I think inerrancy is dead. I mean,
Hmm.
not it's in the same sense that um, Nietzsche said God is dead. I mean, not that God really died, or not that inerrancy is really dead, but the seeds for their death have been sown. Both with the existence of God and with the inerrancy, and so the evangelicals are not going to be able to hold the dike back. They're gonna be overwhelmed with the waters of truth. But that's only that one issue. They can still be moderate evangelicals, and we would still not like them.
Well, for me, it would depend on how they treat other people.
Oh yeah,
Um,
bottom
yeah,
line.
yeah. Um,
I don't
um,
care if you have insane beliefs. Just leave us alone. Or like, don't do anything to harm us. Yeah,
right, right. Like Pastor Buddy, calling for compassion for transgender people and gay people. I,
exactly.
I can get behind that. And I don't care if she's a believer. If she's gonna push for that, then yeah, I'll support her.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if some of these liberals want our support. Like they might even think, well, oh no, no, John Loftus supports me. Oh, I'm screwed now. Because they want to be left alone. They want to be able to convince their constituents or their parishioners. And oh no, an atheist likes what I'm doing, then he's got to be, fired or something like that. So I don't know how that actually transpires, in reality, but they have the arguments, and the conservatives can't match the scholarship of the liberals. I'm telling you that. That's what convinced me to be a liberal. And then all of a sudden I looked around and said, well, yeah, I'm a liberal. Now what?
I kind of did that too. I went from being a staunch conservative, and my son showed me Jordan Klepper, and I found Jordan Klepper hilarious. But what I didn't realize was that over a period of about 2 years, Jordan Klepper completely changed my views on almost everything.
I love that. I love that comedian. I just love him. He's accurate. He's good.
He is. He's very good.
I loved it during the pandemic. I loved watching his videos, and it's just so funny. There's some others out there
Right.
called yeah. There's some others out there. Yeah.
Okay. Michael Beverly says Bill Roach went on a rampage against Lycona. He quoted he quoted a guy, if I believe what you do about the Bible, I'd throw it out the window and quit being a Christian. And I understand that quote perfectly because that is exactly what happened to me. Because I was a biblical literalist. I believed wholeheartedly in inerrancy, and inerrancy was the bedrock of my faith. And so, as soon as somebody pointed out to me that one point of the Bible was not true, my whole faith went out the window.
I appreciate those sentiments. It has happened to more than you and lots of people. They've been taught that it's inerrant. So one error all of a sudden destroys my faith. The liberals or the moderates and the liberals will say, well, you were taught wrong, and because you were taught wrong, that's why you've lost your faith. Now, if you were just
Right.
like raised to believe in moderate faith or a liberal faith, you would never have lost your faith. Um, but you have something that they don't. I mean, you have when you talk about an error, like there are errors like okay, maybe a comma was left out, or maybe rather than 10,000 soldiers died, maybe it was 1,000 soldiers or something like that. Uh, you can dismiss those as like, oh, maybe scribal errors or something like that. But when it's a doctrinal issue,
Right.
like yeah, Paul and James, they had to dispute about whether faith and saves you or works saves you, and maybe how Jesus was described by Luke versus. Oh, by the way, there's really some controversy between Luke and Matthew. Luke set out in the very first 4 verses of his gospel by saying, I'm going to set you straight about what actually happened, and I'm only going to tell you what just actually happened, and what didn't happen. I'm not going to talk about it. And in Luke's gospel, he leaves out some things. You just look it over. If Matthew talks about some scriptures that don't say what they're supposed to say, so Luke leaves them out. Matthew says there's a Bethlehem star that angel. Now I guess I have to revise what I have to say, thanks to Kip Davis. But angels. Or the Bethlehem star looked down upon us. Well, no one saw it. Luke thought to himself, no one saw that happen. So I'm going to have to leave that one out. And then in Matthew, it says that Joseph, her husband, was convinced by a dream in his sleep. It said he was convinced by a dream in his sleep that Mary's telling the truth. And so he woke up, he got around and said, okay, that's a virgin child. It's not mine. No one would believe that. No one would. So Luke says, I'm going to cut that out. Really, look at it. And then at the very end, towards the he cuts out the saints walking around Jerusalem. No one ever saw that happen. So Luke cut it out. There's more going on there than you think otherwise. So those things are major. Those are not just like an inerrancy type of things. Those things are major. And when it comes to some ethics as well. So it depends on the error. Wouldn't you agree? It's not just there's a small little error there, but there's a big one.
Exactly. For me, it was the flood, and what happened was it was proved to me that the flood did not happen. And once I realized that it did not, that made all of Genesis chapters 6, 7, and 8 not true.
Oh, what about chapters 1 through 3, 4, and 5?
I hadn't gotten yet to the cognitive dissonance that I was holding to, and this is something I've explained to a couple people. Is I tend to compartmentalize my thinking. And so if I'm thinking about one thing, I'm not thinking about how it relates to something else. So I believed in evolution and I believed in old earth creationism. And it never occurred to me that if I put both of those together, that they were incompatible. I've seen
me too.
Since I've since I've become
that happened with me too.
Yeah.
I mean, I find it interesting that here's this God of who created the universe. And when you read Genesis 1, 2, 3, maybe down to 6 if you want, when you read the initial chapters of the Bible, this God knows nothing about creation. The stars, were slung in the sky, and the waters, fell on the earth from a dome in the sky, and blah blah blah. This Creator God doesn't even know anything about the universe.
What I find absolutely mind-boggling, and this was the subject of the video that I just released yesterday, is our J. Warner Wallace does a whole talk on how scientifically accurate creationism is. And I'm going, how can you find this scientifically accurate? It's only scientifically accurate when you do what he did, which is you cherry pick this part of this verse and this part of this verse and this part of this verse and say, see, those things really happen. Those are accurate.
Well, I have an essay on the secular web. I actually have a page over there at the secular web of some of my key articles that aren't in my book. And I look at the Genesis accounts and I go through them. It's called Does God Exist? A Definitive Biblical Argument. And I go through the days of creation, and God is just so the God depicted there is so out of whack with how creation, how the universe came into existence. It's stunning, And here's a creator God who can't even tell us anything. I mean, anything about how the universe came into existence and why and what it's doing and blah blah blah. The fourth day kills it because on the fourth day the sun, moon, and stars are flung into the sky.
Yeah.
Sorry. That only
I
goes with flat.
Yeah, I recently came across a cosmologist or an astrophysicist, I forget which, who is also a believer, and the way he reconciles it is he says that Genesis isn't translated correctly, that God didn't create, they were already there, and there was this cloud covering the earth, and he pulled back the cloud and revealed them. And that's how they were always there. So I brought on Kip Davis and asked him, is there any possibility that this could be translated this way? And nope, no way. That is not what that means.
They will stretch the limits of whatever they're stretching. They come up with an answer because they have this need to believe. And
Exactly.
yeah. So
Exactly.
if they could find any possibility, my God's a God of possibilities, right? Well, then maybe God did it this way, because once you admit God into the picture, he can do the bizarre, he can do the impossible, and just make shit up as you go, which is what a lot of apologists do, but they wouldn't accept my explanation of what they're doing.
Yeah. And I think a big part of that comes from their desire to live forever. They want to know that when they die, they're going to see their loved ones again. They want to know that there's another life. This isn't all that there is. But I think if they would really think about what an afterlife means, an afterlife of eternity, that really isn't a good thing.
Forever sitting down there and worshiping God. Don't you want to go out and play a game of baseball or something? You know what you want to do? And apparently, I'm going to sit here and gain all the knowledge that God can give me over eternity, and even after an eternity, I still wouldn't know everything. I don't know. It sounds like no discovery, and you have no opportunity to be good to somebody because nobody needs for you to do good for them or forgive them or help them because everybody's satisfied. Everybody's already in bliss. There's nobody to forgive. There's no heartache. I'm not. I'm the last one to say that I want those sorts of things, but they do make life makes it spiceful, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, like, okay, so
one
if you sat
thing that
around
I found. What were you saying?
I mean, I want to just go back then and revisit that. I mean, I don't ask for. I mean, I think we need struggles. I think struggles are a good thing, but in the heavenly bliss with no struggles, how would that be a good life? I want struggles that are manageable that we can overcome, but to sit around and I picture heaven where you were just simply like, I don't know, you're on an acid trip or something like that, or you've taken some speed or something like you just and you sit around and do nothing because you're so centered about being happy all the time or something. I don't know what that would be like. I don't even understand what heaven might be like.
Mm-hmm.
Give me some
Mm-hmm.
struggles any day, manageable ones that I can overcome and beat my chest and say, yeah.
Yeah. I listened to one person who said, even if it was something really fun, your absolute favorite thing to do, doing it forever and forever and forever would get to be a drag after a while.
Yeah, I like candy. I like
As
chocolate cake. I don't care to eat it the whole time.
Yeah, I always when I was a believer, I always pictured heaven as being a place where I could do whatever I wanted to, and I could do different things on different days. One day I would work in the kitchen and be, preparing the feast, and one day I'd be out swimming in the Crystal Lake, and and I'd do something different every day.
Well, let me just cut to the chase here. I mean, like if I have my body and I could do and be have think about a pleasured existence afterward, I would have to think about sex, lots of it, with everybody, all the time. But apparently that's forbidden, in the Bible somehow for some reason. But
Yeah.
I don't mean to belabor that point, but that's just one of the occupations I might be interested in doing. And but apparently that's sinful, or so we wouldn't have bodies to do that, or something. There's always some kind of like a caveat or some alternative explanation.
Yeah, yeah. That's one place where the Bible gets really weird is we our bodies stay here, we don't take them with us, and yet you go to heaven and you have a body, but it's not a physical body and it's not in a physical place. And when I start asking believers about it, I say, okay, is it in a different universe? Is there a multiverse?
Yep, exactly. Perfectly said.
One thing that I questioned as a believer, and it wasn't a point that I was questioning my faith on. I was actually just, it was just a sincere question that I asked a number of pastors about was how did we get our canon? And whenever I would ask that question, I would always get a brush off. And having studied in several seminaries and having been a pastor, do you think that was likely because they hadn't learned that in seminary, or they knew that the truth, a truthful answer to that question might challenge my faith?
Well, there are a number of issues that would undercut the Christian faith in the pew. A number of them. That's one of them. I don't know which one's more important than others, but the Catholics have a different canon, uh,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and it becomes pretty obvious as you do some canonical research that the councils that decided which documents were to be included in the canon held sway because of power and jurisdiction. And then they had to come together and come up with some creeds. And during the first 4 centuries after Christianity became a solidified thing in the fourth century to the 8th century, there was a lot of battles, a lot of wars fought over those doctrines. I mean, literally armies against armies to decide doctrine about who Jesus was, or the Trinity, and how you can reconcile that with reason and stuff like that. So those wars settled doctrine for up until the Reformation. So that's an odd way to settle those things. And the canon was key because if you excluded some canon, some books, then or you rewrote them or you edited them out, then that would make different doctrines more important. So there's just it's one of those things. If they studied them out, it certainly is one of the issues that could produce a lot of doubt.
Definitely, definitely. I didn't realize there was that much fighting over it.
Yeah, Philip Jenkins wrote the book called "The Jesus Wars." He's a
Mm-hmm.
historian. I don't know what else I don't know what he believes about things, but the Jesus Wars. How, and if I can remember the subtitle, it goes how 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 four how 4 kings, 3 queens, and blah 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 decided doctrine for 1,000 years. So they called it Jesus Wars. A very enlightening research volume on that sort of stuff. It wasn't settled because of the votes. They didn't sit down and say, let's just vote on this doctrine or that doctrine. They were settled by wars. The winners of the war decided the doctrine, and then they accepted the canon as they wished it to be, and they rejected others, and they rewrote some. I mean, they would edit things, as Bart Ehrman showed us in his book, Misquoting Jesus. So that's not the kind of thing that most Christians want to sit back and think about and say, wait, you mean The reason why we believe in this one view of Jesus over the others is because so and so won a war. Exactly, that's exactly what happened. Oh, well, God did that. God must have caused them to win that war. I mean, they'll never back off on that. But it sure seems quite interesting and coincidental for that to be the actual case.
Well, especially if the Holy Spirit is supposed to be guiding people into truth.
Yeah, but
And
we know He doesn't.
yeah, and if there really were a Holy Spirit that was guiding all of them into truth, they shouldn't be having these wars in the first place. Yeah.
I
Wow.
mean, He should be fired. The Holy Spirit should be fired. He really has not done his job, because even Jesus prayed to God that that the Christians would all be one and agree. Paul talked about that in chapter 1 of Corinthians. He said, I pray that you all be one of one mind. But apparently none of those prayers worked. None of those accolades worked, because we've been, the Christian people, have been divided ever since they started,
Mm-hmm.
with no
Yeah.
signs of changing.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, it's getting worse. I mean, they keep splintering even into more and more groups.
Yeah, I mean, like we were talking about the nuns. They don't. Some of them may be Christians and believers of some kind, but certainly spiritual people. The Christianity is splintered so often that it's, you got maybe some big head over here, and now it's split in so many groups you can't tell some of them apart.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we are out of time. So it was absolutely wonderful having you on. There
Okay.
is a link in the description to an Amazon page, which has a list of John Loftus's books. There are of them. We have touched on a few of them. We touched on his how he became an atheist. One thing we did not get to is there's a book there on how to debate Christians. And if you're someone that's into debate, that one can give you some really good tips. We touched on his book on mythicism. We touched on a few of them, but we really didn't go into depth in any of them. And I did that on purpose so that you could go out and buy the books and get the ones that speak to you the most.
Thank you.
You are most welcome. Okay, next week there is not going to be a specific guest. I had a request from Maya Atkinson for another just hangout day, and so that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to have a few friends and just hang out, and we're just going to talk and see what anybody wants to talk about. And so that's next week's show. So until then, live your life.